Go fucking. We're live, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome back to the BDSM Podcast. Booze, Dessert, Smoke and Meats. Not the other type, but we do kind of draw in from some of that stuff. So I am Professor Porkloin, and I'm here with my lovely co-host,
The Meat Viking. And today, foodies, we're going to talk about my second favorite bean to flick, which is that of the coffee bean. And before you get all wild and goofy on me, my first favorite type of bean to flick is the Mexican jumping bean.
Oh man, I did not know where that was gonna go. You dirty man.
Dirty man.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk a little bit about coffee. Now, it's not normally part of the whole entire BDSM thing, but I feel as if it has a place because we can mix it with some of the stuff like booze or dessert, even meats. So we're gonna chat a little bit about that later on, but I think it will play pretty nicely here into this episode.
I agree.
So, I guess one of the first things we got to start off with, though, is what's in the cup, man.
Well, first of all, I think we need our safe word.
True. Yeah. You have any ideas then? What's the safe word?
Nut. Because it's a bean, it's not a nut.
That's true.
So, but my cup, on the way home, I went to a local spot called the Dragon's Roost, which is known for coffee and board games. And so it's like a coffee shop, but if you want, you can get together with some friends and do some board game clubs and stuff like that. Things like Warhammer, like Age of Sigmar, Blood Bowl, I know they do there, Malifaux, all sorts of fun, like high-end board games that usually require two people, and the staff there is super dope. But I got something that is a mix of like peanut butter and banana, but also in coffee form.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will have to say that this episode, even though it's going to be very educational, I do not partake in the coffee very often. I will usually do a coffee, but it's got to be espresso. And there's got to be a lot of sugar / chocolate that's got to be put into it. But for me, I am just going with a plain old Corona. We had a little cerveza party the other day, and there's some leftover stuff. So that's what I'm finishing up drinking.
Oh, there you go.
Can't go wrong with that.
Nah, I can't go wrong with the good old classic. Now, you do anything special to your Corona?
In the can, no. In a bottle, though, I will put some grenadine in it and a little bit of some lime juice.
Yeah. I think we've mentioned this before, but what I like to do is I do lime juice and Cajun seasoning behind that.
Yeah.
It gets a little angry at you at first, but dude, that thing goes down so good.
Definitely.
You couldn't pay it to go down any better.
Yeah. All right. So coffee. You want to do a little bit of a history lesson about, where coffee has kind of come from?
Well, the coffee plant, native to Ethiopia, was first discovered in the 11th century. Has a white blossom, smells like jasmine, and a red cherry-like fruit. Back then, the leaves of this so-called magical fruit were boiled in water, and the resulting concoction was thought to have medicinal properties. As the fame of the coffee plant spread to other lands, its centuries-long voyage was about to begin. From there, the next place it went to is Yemen in the mid-14th century. And it's been cultivated there for about 300 years. It was drunk following the recipe first used in Ethiopia, and it did so well in Yemen because of the climate and the fertile soil was essentially the ideal conditions for rich coffee.
Yeah, so we'll talk about kind of the coffee belt and what's the point of that. I have a little bit of some research I did. So
from there in 1555, they went to Istanbul. Looks like during the Ottoman era, coffee was discovered. Beans were then roasted over a fire, ground, and then slowly cooked with water on the ashes of a charcoal pile, With its new brewing method and aroma, coffee's renown soon spread even further. Coffee soon became a vital part of palace cuisine and was very popular in the court. From then on, it went to Venice in 1615, Marseilles in 1660, Paris in 1669, Vienna in 1683, London in 1637.
Man, when does it get into the old Americas?
I'm getting there. Holland in 1669 or 1699.
So it's basically killing Europe all the way through the 1600s there.
Yep. And it didn't reach America until 1668, with the first coffee house being in New York called the King's Arms, which actually opened up in 1696.
Interesting.
In 1714, the Dutch actually presented King Louis XIV with a coffee sapling from their plantations on Java. Sapling was planted in the Royal Gardens and Jardin des Plantes in Paris. 1723, a French mariner named Gabriel Deglue, I don't know how to pronounce that, took a sapling from that area and spread it to the Caribbean Isles, as well as Central and South America. 1727, a Portuguese sailor took the saplings to Brazil. And now, actually, because of that, Brazil is the #1 producer of coffee in the world, accounting for 35% of the global coffee production. In 1730s, the British began cultivating coffee in Jamaica. By the mid-19th century, coffee had become one of the most important commodities in world trade.
Interesting. So you were kind of talking in the very beginning there about the coffee plant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what a lot of people don't realize is that it comes from you recognize the bean, obviously, because the bean is one of the most iconic things when it comes to coffee anyway. But a lot of people won't be able to recognize the coffee plant. Now, you said earlier that it had those white long leaves on it. And it actually, the bean comes from one of the cherries that's in there. So I feel like that's pretty cool to learn. You know, I don't really drink it, but to kind of understand that it actually is from a plant is super cool. And do you know that they can get up to like 30 feet in height?
Just the plant?
Just the plant, man.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they're actually pruned a little bit so that they can kind of conserve some of their energy. But yeah, they can get all the way up to 30 feet. And the cherries, they actually grow on the side of the plant, and it's a continuous cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really not that unusual to see flowers, the fruit, and even ripe of those cherries on the same tree. So that's kind of cool to think about, because normally when you're looking at plants, I mean, they have their life cycle, right? Like they have the blooming, and then they have, falling off, and then they start back again. And then no, this one is, hey, we're going to just keep on pumping out cherries here. And so you can harvest us basically at any time that you want.
Yeah, buddy.
But it takes around a year for one of those cherries to actually mature. So after it's first been flowered, usually between 5 to 20 is when it's going to get the most production out of itself. And a lot of the times you're going to get about 10 pounds per year. But the other thing that I realized too is that these damn things can live up to 100 years old.
Oh, that's nice.
So, but I mean, think about it. If it's 80 years old, it's not going to be producing as much as it did when it was, 20. So you can totally see how that's a big reason of why they could last that long. Mm-hmm. So it really is kind of cool to think of like the anatomy of it. Again, they're actually processed from these fruits. Again, the cherry. Yeah, look at that, man.
Yeah, buddy. So I pulled up just some coffee plants on the old Google search, and it actually got me to a place where you can buy straight coffee plants in a pot already. But for everybody looking, you know what they almost remind me of is like
Look like
grapes.
grapes.
Yep.
Yeah. We can probably do a chocolate episode later on because the cacao is pretty similar when it comes to stuff like that. And I don't think a lot of people really know that it comes from a plant as well.
You know what these remind me of?
I can only imagine.
Basil leaves.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Just really big basil leaves.
Yeah.
So if you look at that one right there with the red, all right, that's the outer skin. From what I've been researching, that's the exocarp. So that is the stuff that's going to be protecting everything that's on the inside. Now, if you were to crack that in half, you actually have two things that are in there. You're going to have the pectin layer, and you're going to have the skin that goes around the bean itself. And typically one of those, if you crack it in half, is going to have two sides of the bean. So think of like hemispheres within that, and that's where you're going to get that. So again, they're lined. So I'm trying to think of what's another thing, like peanuts. You know how peanuts have that little shell, that little thin shell on top of it?
Yep.
Essentially, you're going to have the same thing with this coffee bean, or that outer skin, and then the parchment that's surrounding it. So it's really cool to think about the anatomy of that too, you know?
Yeah.
And about 5% of the world's coffee, there's only one bean inside the cherry. So it's actually called a pea berry or snail if you're looking at it in Spanish. And it's just a natural mutation that occurs. So there's some people,
you only get the one bean.
Yeah. So there are some people that believe that these pea berries are actually sweeter. And that they're a little bit more flavorful than your normal standard beans. So sometimes I guess they're manually sorted out, and they go out for special sale. So I would think that people are going to be like, hey, I'll sell this for a 50% upsell, make my money off of it, just to dupe these people thinking that it's going to be sweeter.
You might be onto something right there.
I think
I think I'm good. So unnut myself.
So there's actually about 25 to 100 different species of coffee plants.
Wow.
So
now the different plants, could those be attributed to, because I like hazelnut flavored coffee, would that be attributed to that, or is that like an artificial process?
I think they're essentially based off of where they're at, the location. It's because they range differently. I mean, you can have one that's a small tree, and then ones that are, 30 feet high, and they can have different colors. And I think the genus part of that whole species is the reason why there's so many different coffee plants.
Gotcha.
But typically in commercial coffee, there's really two of them that are very important, and the Arabica.
Arabica?
Yeah, Arabica. There you go. And Robusta are the two that are basically the main one. So the Arabica ones actually, from what I've read, are descended from that original one in Ethiopia.
Oh. Huh.
So, and it's approximately about 70% of the world's coffee production is going to be that type. So with this one, I guess they're a little bit different because the beans are flatter and they're a little bit more elongated. So a little bit longer when you compare that to the Robusta. And then actually these beans have less caffeine.
Oh.
So I always laugh with people that think about caffeinated coffee and decaf. I mean, decaf doesn't mean that there's no caffeine in it. It's just meaning that there's a reduced amount of it. So I always laugh when people are like, "Oh yeah, I can't have decaf because I'll stay up all night." It's like, you're still getting caffeine, man. You're just not getting a full cup's worth.
Right. Yeah, I never knew what decaf coffee was. I always thought it was the like the no caffeine coffee. Because way back when I was a wee young lad, the grandparents used to take me to church, and afterwards we would go to this restaurant, and they'd meet up with all their friends, and there'd be like you'd get 3 regular coffees, and then people would switch to decaf. They would always tell me, "There's no caffeine in this." Okay.
Yeah, right. All right, Grandpa, you just keep on drinking your coffee.
Mhm.
So, um, hey man, do you know that coffee's grown in about 50 countries?
I do now. I know I named off a bunch earlier, but
Yeah, 50 countries around the world, man. You said that. I mean, I hear you now.
yeah. Is it on my end or is it on your end?
I'm not seeing anything coming up on my screen, so it might be on your end this time.
Interesting. So, oh, where was I at?
I basically just said that there's more than 50 countries around the world, and you
Oh,
said, yeah, you named a couple of them off.
well,
Excuse
yeah.
me.
Is there like,
Well,
I think I named off the biggest exporter earlier in the podcast.
so yeah, man, we're talking about 50 countries that it's been produced in.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at the North American and the Caribbean, obviously you're going to see it in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see it in Mexico. Typically have the good weather for it,
Right.
right? You're looking for something that's going to be nice, 70, 75 shaded. So your Mexico, your Puerto Rico, they're all going to be in yours, and they all have variety of beans too. So like the Puerto Rican one, it actually are balanced. They have a little bit more acidity, and they have more of a fruity aroma than the other ones from Mexico and from Hawaii.
Well, shit.
I mean, South America, you're looking at Colombia. You
Mm-hmm.
gotta have your Colombian, right?
Yep.
Um, Brazil,
Cuba.
variety of different places.
Mm-hmm. So, well, foodies, I hate to end this mid conversation, but sadly, my internet is not working, and I think it's going to kick me again here in a minute.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to make a second part of this, or maybe
Yeah,
even just run it the way it is, because sometimes technology blows.
yeah. I think we'll run this the way it is, and then what we'll do is we'll come up next episode and we'll do a part 2 of this, where hopefully the internet's better. We'll dive into coffee, being involved in like snacks, being
Yeah.
involved in meats, and then also being involved in like booze and stuff like that.
Yeah. So we'll kind of give you a little bit of a history thing now, but I guess next time we'll talk about how it's going to be applied then.
Yeah. So once again, very sorry about this, foodies. Sometimes technology just sucks. So I've been the Meat Viking.
It's Professor Porkloin
All right. Later,
signing
everybody.
off.
Yep.